the island of Lindau at the tri-border area of Switzerland, Germany and Austria. Prehistory and Roman strategy in Lindau, 4000 before Christ to Anno Domini 260. Geological foundations and the pile-dwelling cultures. Lindau's strategic importance is directly rooted in its geological origins. The island is a striking moraine hill, an enduring remnant of the Alpine glaciers of the last ice age. This elevation provided a naturally flood-safe landing and settlement site, protected from the often fluctuating water levels of Lake Constance. Archaeological research along the shores of Lake Constance, and particularly in the Seefelder Aach Delta, confirms that the region has been intensively settled since the Neolithic. Finds from the various pile-dwelling cultural groups, also called lakeshore settlements, which flourished between 4300 and 800 before Christ, show that the lake already served as the most important transport artery of the Alpine foreland during the Neolithic and the Bronze Age. Lindau itself lay in an ideal position along this aquatic thoroughfare. Although traces on today's island have been obscured by later construction, the continuous settlement in its immediate surroundings strongly suggests that Lindau's strategic point was constantly used for fishing, agriculture and the exchange of goods. Celtic long-distance trade and the Vindelician route. With the onset of the Iron Age from about 850 before Christ, the Bay of Lindau became integrated into the complex Celtic long-distance trade network. The region lay within the sphere of influence of the Vindelici, whose territory stretched from Lake Constance to the Danube. Lindau developed into an important stopover and transshipment hub along a critical north-south axis. Goods such as high-quality Hallstatt salt, an indispensable preservative, iron ingots and manufactured metal items, for example fibulae, circulated through the area. These commodities were either transported across nearby Alpine passes, such as the Splügen or the Brenner, into Italy, or routed via the lake and overland paths to large Celtic centers and trading hubs, so-called oppida, in the north. Lindau's harbor thus functioned not only as a local market, but as a vital component of pre-Roman global logistics. Roman annexation and the province of Raetia. The first major rupture in regional history came with the Roman conquest under Emperor Augustus' generals Drusus and Tiberius in 15 before Christ. The area was incorporated into the new imperial province of Raetia, whose capital later became Augusta Vindelicum, Augsburg. For the Romans, Lake Constance, Lacus Brigantinus, was militarily and logistically indispensable for securing the Rhine-Danube frontier. During this period, the island of Lindau most likely served as a fortified transshipment station, statio, or naval support base. Supplies were unloaded here from ships and transferred to the overland routes leading to the forts further north. The most significant evidence of Roman organization and elevated lifestyle is the excavation of the Villa Suburbana in today's Lindau district of Eschach. The villa was not a simple villa rustica, agricultural estate, but an imposing country residence. The finds indicate a highly developed and affluent elite in the region. The presence of an elaborate hypocaust system, an underfloor heating, underscores the luxury and Roman sophistication found even in this frontier zone. The villa formed part of the organized Roman supply economy. It most likely produced or stored wine, grain, and other goods that, via the centralized Roman logistics networks, evidenced by finds of imported terra sigillata pottery, supplied the legends and administrative posts. Decline and continuity of the site. The collapse of the Roman frontier system, particularly after the abandonment of the Upper German Rhaetian limes in the 3rd century Anno Domini, led to the Alemannic incursions and the end of the Roman administration in Raetia. Romanization was largely reversed, and the economy became far more localized once again. Nevertheless, Lindau retained its importance. The geographical imperative of being the best natural harbor and fixed anchorage along the lake's passage remained unchanged. Although the Roman order crumbled, the island was poised to reaffirm its role as a transport and settlement hub in the early Middle Ages for the emerging Germanic rulers, later the Franks. The strategic function of the site outlasted the fall of the empire. The Middle Ages, ecclesiastical foundation and the rise of the free imperial city, year 820 to 1500. The Carolingian foundation, the imperial abbey of Lindau. After the collapse of Roman structures and the consolidation of Frankish rule in the 8th and 9th centuries, Lindau experienced a political reawakening. The decisive turning point was the founding of a canonist abbey, a women's religious foundation, on the island around the year 820, presumably a noble family associated with the Carolingian dynasty. Imperial immediacy, the abbey attained the prestigious status of Reichsunmittelbarkeit, imperial immediacy, meaning it was not subject to any local count or bishop, but answered directly to the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This made Lindau an imperial enclave in the Lake Constance region and effectively prevented regional dynasties such as the Welfs or the Staufers from gaining control of the strategically important harbor. Spiritual and economic center, the abbey, often led by a high-ranking abbess, administered extensive estates and served as an important religious and economic power center. It maintained close intellectual ties with other Benedictine hubs, evidenced by the first document mention of Lindau in 882, which appears in a record from the famous Abbey of St. Gallen. The rise of the burghers and the conflict. Around the secure ecclesiastical stronghold of the abbey, a secular settlement, Burgus, developed. The town prospered greatly from its position as a junction between water and land routes. Long-distance trade with Italian, Swabian and Alemannic regions in particular led to the emergence of a wealthy class of merchants and craftsmen. Growing prosperity and civic self-confidence sparked a centuries-long conflict with the abbess beginning in the 13th century. The townspeople sought municipal self-government, town rights, aiming to control trade regulations, tolls and legal proceedings themselves, and no longer be subject to ecclesiastical jurisdiction. This struggle was typical of high medieval urban development, but it was especially intense in Lindau because control over a major regional harbor was at stake. The culmination, elevation to a free imperial city in the year 1358. The political struggle reached its climax in the 14th century. On 26th of July 1358, Lindau was elevated to the status of free imperial city by an imperial act of Emperor Charles IV. This marked the triumph of civic power over ecclesiastical authority and the definitive political establishment of Lindau. Significant sovereignty. The city acquired a quasi-state level of autonomy exercised by the new civic oligarchy, the leading merchant families. Among the most important privileges granted were the right to mint coinage, allowing the city to produce its own Lindau currency, high jurisdiction, including the authority to carry out capital punishment, full control over customs and taxation on all goods entering the city by land or through the harbor. Importance within imperial politics. As a free imperial city, Lindau received a vote and permanent seat in the imperial diet and became a member of the Swabian imperial circle. This compelled surrounding princes and towns to treat Lindau as an equal and to include it in all major regional defense and trade alliances, such as the Swabian League of Cities. The symbol of power, the old town hall. The construction of the representative Old Town Hall in the 15th century served as the physical manifestation of this political and economic triumph. The building functioned not only as the meeting place of the city council, but also as a warehouse and trading exchange for the wealthy merchant elite. Its splendid design, further enhanced by the painted facade applied in the 16th and 17th centuries, symbolized the unmistakable success of autonomous civic governance and the independence of Lindau's citizens from feudal or ecclesiastical authority. By this time, Lindau had become a small but fully autonomous political entity. Prosperity and struggle for survival. Trade, Reformation and the end of imperial autonomy, year 1500 to 1806. The Golden Age, Lindau as a linen metropolis. The 16th century marked the peak of the economic power of the free imperial city of Lindau. The city's civic oligarchy, composed of a small number of closely interconnected merchant families, such as the Klauser, Haider and Hummel dynasties, controlled local and long-distance trade. They capitalized on Lindau's unrivaled strategic location at the intersection of the major salt routes from the Alpine region and the trade roads to Italy via the Brenner and Splügenpass, which merged into the shipping routes on Lake Constance. Lindau's unique economic profile lay in its specialization in the linen trade. The city served as the central transshipment hub for the linen produced in the surrounding Swabian and Bavarian territories, particularly the Allgäu. Lindau's merchants did not merely handle credit transactions and storage, often directly within their own merchant houses, such as the Haus zum Kawatzen, but also oversaw finishing processes and quality control. Lindau linen enjoyed a reputation as a high-quality export commodity and was traded through well-established merchant networks as far as Lyon in France, the Netherlands, Bruges, Antwerp, and the markets of northern Italy, Venice, Milan. Revenues from customs and duties on this flourishing long-distance trade filled the city's treasury and safeguarded its political autonomy. The confessional crisis, coexistence under tension. The Reformation brought about profound theological and political decisions that immediately endangered Lindau's privileged status. In the 1520s, the town council and the citizenry adopted the Protestant faith, influenced by reformers such as Kaspar Schwenkfeld. Lindau quickly positioned itself among the leading reform-oriented cities and was one of the 4 free imperial cities, Straßburg, Constance, Memmingen and Lindau, that presented their own reformed confession, the Confessio Tetrapolitana, the Tetrapolitan Confession, at the Diet of Augsburg in 1530. This constituted an act of maximal political independence from Emperor Charles V. What made Lindau unique, however, was its confessional duality. The Catholic Canonist Abbey, the city's original foundation institution, retained its status of imperial immediacy and continued to exist as a Catholic enclave on an island that had otherwise become Protestant. For centuries, this coexistence required constant, often delicate diplomacy between the city council and the abbeys to resolve territorial, legal and religious disputes and to preserve the island's political integrity. The existential turning point, the 30 Years' War, 1618 till 1648. Lindau's existential vulnerability became most evident during the 30 Years' War. Owing to its strategic position on the lake and its location at the intersection of imperial, Swedish and French spheres of influence, the city was repeatedly threatened and forced to expend enormous sums on defenses and mercenary troops. The military crisis culminated in the siege of 1647. The Protestant city was blockaded by allied Swedish-French forces under General Wrangel. Despite the severe economic disruption and widespread hardship, Lindau, with its robust fortifications and logistical support from Switzerland and Habsburg Vorarlberg, successfully withstood the siege and repelled the attackers. Consequences: Although Lindau preserved its imperial autonomy in the Peace of Westphalia 1648, the economic damage was devastating. Long-distance trade networks had collapsed, and many merchants migrated to more stable regions. Lindau lost its former prominence to larger commercial centers such as Augsburg and Nuremberg, and declined to a regionally significant, though no longer internationally influential, trading town. The end of independence, mediatization, and the Bavarian era. Lindau's final political decline came not through military conquest, but through a sweeping territorial reorganization. As part of Napoleon's restructuring of Germany, the mediatization took place in accordance with the imperial deputation's final recess of 1803. Loss of autonomy. On 12th of June 1803, Lindau lost its status as a free imperial city and with its full sovereignty. Brief transitions. The city was briefly granted to Prince Bretzenheim, and in 1804 it was ceded to the Austrian Empire. Final annexation. After Austria's defeat in the Third Coalition War and the Treaty of Pressburg 1805, Austria was compelled to hand Lindau over to the newly established Kingdom of Bavaria. On March 4, 1806, Bavarian troops entered the city, and the transfer was completed. With this act, 448 uninterrupted years of political independence as a free imperial city came to an end. Lindau became a provincial town within Bavaria, necessitating a profound administrative and economic reorientation. The logistical revolution, the German Empire, and the World Wars, 1806 to 1945. Loss of sovereignty and the need for reinvention, 1806 to 1840. With Lindau's final incorporation into the Kingdom of Bavaria in 1806, the city's unique status as an autonomous city-state came to an end. Now a Bavarian border town, Lindau lost the lucrative customs revenues it had enjoyed during its time as a free imperial city. The Bavarian administration subordinated Lindau to the district capital of Kempten and replaced the former civic oligarchy with a state bureaucracy. Economically, Lindau entered a period of crisis. The traditional linen trade collapsed in the face of industrial competition, and the city urgently needed to find a new economic foundation. The solution emerged in the infrastructure projects of the industrial era. Lindau was to be transformed from a trading center into a modern transportation hub for the entire Bavarian southwest. The largest construction project, the railway causeway and the new harbor, 1847 to 1856. The Bavarian government recognized the strategic necessity of securing direct access to the Lake Constance. This led to the largest urban and engineering project in Lindau's history. The railway causeway. Between 1847 and 1853, an embankment was constructed to permanently link the island with the mainland and bring railway tracks directly onto the island. Once completed, it connected Lindau to the Bavarian Maximilian Railway, which ran from Munich via Augsburg and Kempten. Lindau became the terminus and the most important water-based transit point of the Bavarian rail network. The new harbor, 1853 to 1856. The old medieval harbor was no longer adequate for steamship traffic. The new representative harbor was ceremoniously opened in 1856. It was designed as a multimodal logistics hub, efficiently integrating railway operations, steamship services, and warehouse facilities. Landmarks. The harbor received its iconic landmarks, the 33-meter new lighthouse, completed in 1856, the southernmost lighthouse in Germany, and the 6-meter statue of the Bavarian lion, inaugurated in 1856, sculpted by Johann von Halbig in München, symbolizing the city's allegiance to the Kingdom of Bavaria. Transformation into a logistics and tourism hub. These investments enabled Lindau's transformation from a traditional trading town into a modern logistics and tourism center. Logistics. Lindau became the central border and customs station for goods traffic between Bavaria, Austria-Hungary via Bregenz and Rorschach, and Switzerland via Romanshorn. The Bavarian railway line now connected directly to the steamship routes of Lake Constance. Tourism. The island benefited enormously from the rise of Alpine and spa tourism in the 19th century. Its excellent railway connections and idyllic setting attracted affluent visitors and spa guests. Prestigious grand hotels, such as the Hotel Bayerischer Hof, were established and fueled the city's emerging service economy. Lindau became an important border and resort town in the German Empire from 1871 and later in the Weimar Republic. The era of the World Wars, 1914 to 1945. First World War. During the First World War, Lindau's function as an international transit hub was severely limited. Borders were militarized and tourism collapsed. The island served primarily logistical purposes for the Imperial German Army and acted as a supply station on the border with Austria-Hungary, which was now an ally. National Socialism and the Second World War. Under National Socialism, from 1933 onward, Lindau retained its strategic relevance. Border installations were expanded and the city, like many others, was incorporated into the armaments and wartime economy. Unlike many German cities located near major transport nodes, however, Lindau was largely spared from Allied bombing. This was due to a mix of fortunate circumstances and the assumption that Lindau, with its relatively minor industrial importance compared to cities like Friedrichshafen or Constance, was not the primary target. As a result, the city's historical architecture and essential infrastructure remained intact, an advantage that proved crucial in the immediate post-war period. The geopolitical special role and the scientific reorientation, 1945 to present. The extraterritorial enclave Lindau in the French zone, 1945 to 1955. The end of the Second World War confronted Lindau with one final, highly complex geopolitical turning point. Although historically and politically a part of Bavaria, and although Bavaria was assigned to the American occupation zone, the Allied powers made a strategic exception, due to the need to control the entire Lake Constance region, especially its waterways and the connections to Switzerland. Lindau was placed under French administration. Lindau thus became an extraterritorial enclave of the French zone, embedded within the American zone. Administration and control. The city was subject to the French military government and served as an important administrative center for French operations on Lake Constance. The French presence continued until the occupation ended in 1955, at which point the city was fully reintegrated into the Federal Republic of Germany. Intellectual climate. This phase of international administration and close contact with the Western world, especially France and neighboring neutral Switzerland, significantly contributed to fostering an atmosphere of openness, neutrality, and cross-border exchange. This became an essential foundation of what would follow. The founding of the Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings, 1951. Against this backdrop of renewed international exchange, the idea emerged to turn Lindau into a global meeting place for science. The establishment of the Lindau Nobel Laureate Meetings in 1951 was an act of outstanding cultural and political significance. The initiators, the driving forces behind the initiative, were the Bavarian dentist Franz Karl Hein and the local physician Gustav Parade, both of whom recognized the need to reconnect Germany's scientific elite, isolated by National Socialism and the war, with the global forefront of research. They soon gained the support of Count Leonard Bernadotte of Mainau, a member of the Swedish royal family and owner of Lindau Island, who used his close ties to the Swedish court and the Nobel Committee to make the idea feasible. The founding purpose, the aim was not to create a mass event, but to enable intellectual reconstruction. The meetings were intended to build a bridge between Nobel laureates representing the pinnacle of global science and young German researchers. The core mission was to provide the next generation of scientists with access to international knowledge and recognition. The focus: the early meetings alternated between medicine and physics, chemistry. The deliberate choice of a small, idyllic island as the venue was meant to foster an informal and personal atmosphere, far removed from the rigid formality of traditional academic conferences, redefining Lindau's global role. With the establishment of the meetings, Lindau transformed its historical function one final time. The island's commodity was no longer linen or logistics, but knowledge. Shift in focus. The initially national orientation quickly expanded, and the meetings evolved into a truly international forum. Today, young scientists from all over the world participate. Since 2004, economic sciences have also been included in the meeting cycle, in memory of Alfred Nobel. Lindau as an institution. Lindau has become a neutral, established center of scientific dialogue. The island's centuries-long role as a diplomatic and political hub has been carried into the modern age by serving as a stage for the global intellectual elite. Economic impact. The contemporary island economy is strongly oriented toward conferences and high-quality tourism. The Inselhalle, expanded and modernized several times, serves as the central venue and symbolizes Lindau's enduring commitment to its scientific mission. Lindau today is more than a picturesque town. It is a global hub for the exchange of knowledge, one that has leveraged its unique post-war geopolitical situation to transform its historical role as a strategic interface into a lasting scientific mission.